Historic battlefields offer a unique experience. You're often met with a range of emotions, from awe and reverence to sadness and contemplation. But to me, nothing prepares you for the visceral impact of standing on these hallowed grounds where so many lives were lost. After the fall of Atlanta on September 1st of 1864, General John Bell Hood and his 30,000-man army moved into Tennessee, hoping to divert Major General William T. Sherman's army by threatening their supply base of Nashville. Sherman did not take the bait. Instead, he would dispatch Major General John Schofield's 30,000-man Army of the Ohio to protect Nashville and link up with an additional 25,000 Union troops under the command of Major General George Thomas. Hood's hopes for a successful campaign rested on defeating Schofield before these two forces joined. After a missed opportunity at the Battle of Spring Hill on November 29th of 1864, Hood would pursue Schofield to the small town of Franklin. General Hood would begin to form his troops just outside the outskirts of Franklin. The nearly 2-mile-wide Confederate line steps off in the fading afternoon light at approximately 4 p.m. Hood only had one artillery battery in place before he launches his attack. In turn, his men are immediately torn to pieces by Union artillery with no ability to answer.
We had gone but little ways when the artillery opened fire on us, which had but little effect on the line, save when a bursting shell would tear its way through the ranks. The men would soon close in and make the line solid again. Lieutenant W.D. Mintz, 5th Arkansas Infantry.
Gaping holes were ripped into the formations of the advancing Confederate infantry. Yet, the line swoops forward and quickly overwhelms 2 Union brigades and Brigadier General George Wagner's division. These men were placed a half-mile in front of the main Union line and ultimately were in an untenable position. After just one volley, Wagner's men are routed and they begin a desperate retreat towards the main Union line. Nearly 700 of Wagner's men were taken prisoner. The Confederates in the center advanced using Wagner's men as a human shield while yelling,
"Go into the works with them!"
Union infantry behind the breastworks of the main line hold their fire for fear of hitting their own men. As a result, the charging Confederates slam into the Union troops and shatter the center of the Union line. 3 brigades, led by Major General Patrick Cleburne, advance into the Union position along the Columbia Pike. They are met with heavy artillery fire from the 1st Kentucky Battery, along with a 2-gun section of the 6th Ohio Battery. These Union guns pour double and triple canister into the advancing Great Wave.
Fire!
General, I will take the works or fall in the attempt. Major General Patrick Cleburne.
Major General Patrick Cleburne is killed before he can reach the works.
He sought out our regiment, charged in with it, and died with it. He could have selected no better place. Captain C.W. Fraser.
The 100th and 104th Ohio break. Now unsupported, the 2 guns of the 6th Ohio, commanded by Lieutenant Aaron Baldwin, hold their ground. Double shots of canister tearing through Cleburne's men.
I could hear 2 sounds above the roar of battle, the detonation of the charges and the crunching of bones in front of their muzzles. Lieutenant Aaron Baldwin.
On the west side of the Columbia Pike, a similar story is unfolding. The left wing of the 72nd Illinois Infantry was swept away, while the 50th Ohio suffered nearly 50% casualties. The Confederates, under Major General John Brown, had now penetrated almost 50 yards into the center of the Union line. Waiting for them was the inexperienced 44th Missouri Infantry under the command of Colonel Robert Bradshaw. Originally placed in a reserve position, the 650 men of the 44th were now tasked with holding the Union line. Within minutes, nearly 150 men of the 44th Missouri would become casualties. Despite these losses, the 44th fends off nearly 13 separate Confederate attacks, the ground becoming littered with bodies. Union reinforcements finally arrived. A brigade, led by Emerson Updike, held in reserve against orders, now surges into the Union center. Hand-to-hand combat ensues. Updike, riding his horse, empties his pistol at the advancing Confederates and then uses it as a club until it breaks. Grabbing a musket, he began clubbing the enemy with that.
Our colors suffered very much from the terrible fire of the enemy. The flagstaffs were partially cut away, and the flags badly cut and torn. Lieutenant Colonel John Russell, 44th Illinois Infantry.
I saw Updike near the center of his line, urging his men forward. I gave the colonel no orders as I saw him engaged in doing the very thing to save us. General David Stanley.
After having his horse shot out from under him and taking a bullet, Major Arthur MacArthur, commander of the 24th Wisconsin Infantry, was struck in the shoulder by a mini-ball. Drawing his sword, he began to fight his way towards a Confederate battle flag, visible swaying above the mass of men. A Confederate officer blocks his path, firing a pistol point-blank into MacArthur's chest. MacArthur then thrusts his sword into the Confederate officer, but as he fell, fires once more. MacArthur collapses beside his foe, but would incredibly survive his wounds. After the war, MacArthur would father 3 children, one of them being General Douglas MacArthur.
I never saw the dead lay near so thick. I saw them upon each other, dead and ghastly in the powder-dimmed starlight. Colonel Emerson Updike.
While fighting raged at the center of the Union line, the Confederates also advanced against the Union left. Major General William Loring, General Edward Walhall, and General Samuel French's divisions were advancing over the eastern portion of the battlefield. The open ground offered the perfect targets for Union artillery, not only from the main Union line, but also from batteries across the river at Fort Granger. As nearly 20 pieces of Union artillery pound William Loring's men, they advanced through the Carton Plantation, which would soon be established as a field hospital. Almost immediately, shattered men began filling the home, surgeons setting up in almost every room of the house, as nearly 300 wounded Confederate soldiers were brought inside the Carton home. Hundreds more were spread throughout the rest of the property, including in the slave cabins. Come daybreak, nearly 150 of these men would be dead. Caught in the middle of this savage fight was the Carter family. Their house was right in the center of the Union line and would be used as a field headquarters by the Union Army. Sadly, among the dead was Todd Carter, the middle child of the Carter family. Having enlisted in the Confederate Army 3 years earlier, this was the first time Carter had returned to his hometown. He would be mortally wounded in the battle just a few hundred yards away from his own house. He was found by his family after the battle and died early the next day. Around midnight, the Union Army began to withdraw towards Nashville. Left behind was nearly 9,000 casualties. Of those, 6,000 were Confederate, including 6 Confederate generals. The Army of the Tennessee had lost over 20% of its men in just 5 hours of fighting.